Okay, we better get started because we don't have a lot of time. I have to finish by around 6:20 today. Okay, so we were learning this halacha. If a person is not sure if he borrowed money from his friend, and his friend says, "Good morning, I know for sure that you owe me money, so even though midine adam, a person is pater, but he's chayiv b'dinei shamayim. He's chayiv from a heavenly perspective to fulfill that which his friend says he knows for sure that he owes him." Now, that's only when you don't have any prior knowledge of owing this person money. But if you remember that you borrowed money from him and you just don't remember if you paid it back, so that was the next case. And then, so then you have and your friend says you definitely did not pay me back. So then he can even take you to court for that, because bori v'shema bori ada. So that's what we had clarified. Now, if your friend says, "I'm not sure if you owe me money," and you have no knowledge of it, so then you don't even have a heavenly obligation. But if you know that you borrowed from him or that you owed him money, and you don't know, that's when we said that you have to pay him. And that's true, even if your friend does not demand payment at all. Even if you go over to him and say, "I don't know if I owe you money or not," so then, and he says to you, "Well, I don't know if you owe me money or not." So, but you know that you at one time did owe him money because you borrowed something from him, or you promised that you would split lunch with him or whatever. You know what happens all the time. You go out to lunch with an old friend, and so the guy says, "Okay, this time it's on me, next time it's on you," right? And then you go out to lunch again, and you don't remember who paid last time, right? We don't remember. It's okay, don't worry about it. But if you're not sure, so then you should try to foot the bill. But the final thing we saw is that if your friend says you for sure do not owe me anything, and you're not sure whether you owe him or not, so then you have no obligation whatsoever. And that's true even if you are convinced that you do owe him money. But once he says you owe me nothing, he's been moichel, and therefore you shouldn't feel an obligation. You still may feel a duty, a sense of, I want to pay him, but okay. Now, afal pisha eno tovo klal. I think we're in the middle of this when we had to stop on Friday. If the fellow is not demanding payment at all, but you know that at one time you did owe him money and you're not sure if you paid him or not, avolim tovo bevadai. But if your friend says you for sure did not pay me back, sha'omer manali biyad chavadai, v'hanit va'omer nachon shahaya lecha biyadi aval eni yodeya im ichzarti lach olo. And the nitva, the defendant says, it's true that you lent me money, but I simply don't remember if I paid you back or not. So chayiv l'shalim gam b'dinei adam. So then you even have a based-in obligation. The guy could actually take you to based-in. Here we say that if a person has a definitive claim against you, he says, "I know you owe me money," and you say, "I'm not sure if I owe you money," so the bari claim, the certain claim, trumps the statement of doubt. Okay? Now, v'im lo tavo adam elame atzmo omer lachaver hil bisani ve'eni odeim epsarti lach departim dinei adam. Now, if you tell your friend, he doesn't claim anything against you, but you tell him, I know that I borrowed money from you, and I don't remember if I've ever paid you back. So there, you're pater midinei adam. You don't have a based-in obligation, but you want to fulfill your heavenly obligation. Im halom meishiv lo achar kach eini yodeya im hil bisicha, aval bari li shalo paratani me'olam. And then your friend says to you, "Listen, I don't remember if I ever lent you money, but one thing I can tell you, you never paid me for what you think you might have borrowed from me. I don't remember ever lending you money, but if you say you borrowed money from me, I can tell you for sure that I never got any payment from you. That much I know. So in that situation, kasav hataz v'hashach degam bazeh pater medinei adam. So in that situation, the fellow can't take you to Beis Din. In other words, you're pater medinei adam. V'hatumen palagal zeh usvir le'dechayv. And the Tumen says no. The Tumen says that you would be obligated even in a Beis Din in that situation. Because why? Because your own admission is that you owe the fellow money. Because and based on your admission that you at one time had a debt, and he tells you, I know for sure you never paid me anything, but I'm not aware of such a debt. I guess according to the Tumen, you can join the two arguments to come to the conclusion that you definitely owe the guy money. It's only when the creditor doesn't know anything. He doesn't know whether he lent you money. He doesn't know whether you paid him back. In that situation, there's no earthly obligation, but there's still a heavenly obligation. Now, what are you going to do in a situation where there's a machlokes, whether in the poskim, what is considered to be compensation? Which is an interesting discussion. Like, when I gave you this, is that considered to be compensation for the debt? And a person says, I paskin like those group of poskim who say that my action was proper compensation for the debt. So based on the fact that you can say, I paskin like so-and-so, who says that what I did constitutes a repayment of the debt, so then the Achronim have this dispute whether there's still a heavenly obligation. You could certainly wiggle your way out of going to Beis Din because you could say, I paskin like so-and-so who says that I don't owe you the money anymore. But then the guy says, yeah, but according to these other poskim, you do owe me the money. So you're at a standstill. So maybe I can't collect from you in Beis Din. But what about the guy? What about my heavenly obligation? So this is a machlokus in the Achronim. And he says in the footnote, how can you say that you know for sure you paskin like a certain posek? You know, mishum dahavi bori b'chiyuva b'sofek b'chazara, because you say I'm certain that I need you the money at some point, but I'm also, but I want to paskin like the such and such a posek who says that I don't owe you the money. I had a situation like this where a guy had hired somebody and then his business went belly up. So he wanted to claim that he wanted to paskin like those poskim who say that you can create a limited liability company or partnership, whatever it is. And it's the company that owes you money, not me personally. But this is a big machlokus in the poskim. Remember, we had started to look into this. I still haven't forgotten. This weighs heavily on my mind, this very halacha about creating a corporation where you can distance yourself from personal liability. And we saw that it's a very complicated discussion, which I plan to give a whole shir on one of these days.
So this is after the fact that you hired him personally?
Yeah.
And you want to create those two?
No. So you hired him for the company that you created. And then the company decides the company goes out of business.
This is like a common thing that you work for a company, the company
Goes out of business.
And but the owner is super rich and he's still living,
That's right. And he ends up stiffing his employees, right? And when you're dealing with from people, it's very not nice. Guy could be very wealthy, davens next to you in shul, and you put in lots and lots of hours because he said it's a startup and we're going to make lots of money. And then lo and behold, he decides that he's going to close up the company because it's not going quickly enough or whatever, for whatever reason. Now you got bills to pay, you the employee, but he says, sorry, It's a limited liability company. What do they call it here? Is it limited liability partnership, or what is it called here in limited partnership? You can't go over the owner, right? So this is a machlokes, whether or not a person can rely on saying, well, I go according to those poskim who say that a corporation is a separate entity from the owner. Because we saw that there are other poskim who say that no, you can't hide behind the veil of the corporation. Okay. All right. Now, I want to go over the Likutim. Wait a second, just making sure I finished all of the Imrei Yaakov. Oh, I'm sorry. There's a little bit more Imrei Yaakov. That the imhala meshiv lo vadai she'ein chachayavli, if the creditor says, I know for a fact that you don't owe me anything, or he says, you don't owe me anything. So that's a declaration that even if some point you did owe me money, I'm moichel. And therefore you shouldn't feel even a heavenly obligation to pay him. But if you just feel a sense of, I just don't want to have this looming over me, you certainly have a right to pay him back. It's only if the creditor says, you certainly don't owe me anything. But if he says, look, I don't know, I just don't know. So he's not being moichel, he's just saying, I don't know whether you owe me money or not. And the reason is why you still have that heavenly debt to him is because since you acknowledge that you owed him money at some point, you should have paid attention if you actually paid him back or not. In other words, you would think that when you incur a debt from someone and you don't know if you paid it back, you would think that you would remember such a thing if you paid back your debts. I'm sorry, it's referring to the creditor. He says the creditor should have paid attention as to whether this debt was paid back or not. And since he didn't, and he says, you certainly don't owe it to me, in other words, if I go over to a creditor and I say, I borrowed money from you, and I'm not sure if I paid you back, we would expect that the creditor would say, let me look into this. And he would try to go through his daily calendar of the past few weeks, go through whatever ledgers he has, and figure out, did this guy Taka lend me, did I lend him money? The fact that he's not going to that extent to bother to do that, that's a sign that he's being completely moichel. Not that he's being moichel erroneously, because he doesn't think that he ever lent money to this guy, but rather because it's not important to him. Shimon goes over to Reuven and says, I know I borrowed some money for gas from you one day, and I just don't remember if I paid you back. If Reuven's attitude is, forget about it, you don't owe me anything. It's not that he's saying, no, I don't remember lending you money. He's saying it's not worth my while to bother checking whether you ever paid me back. So let's just forget about it. And that's called a mechila. Aval hashach poligal zeh usfirle de'ein kapeda bekach, v'gam im lo amar b'lashon vadei rak stam ein chachayav li, adin kain the pater the halom achala. The shach, however, says that even if you didn't say you certainly don't owe me money, but you just said you don't owe me. You didn't say bevadai, vadai, certainly you don't owe me money, but you just said you don't owe me. That's sufficient. The imchazer achar kach hatovea va'omer ta'isi becheshboni techila ba'achshav dikdakti umatzasi shenisharta chayavli. Now, what happens if afterwards the creditor comes back to you and says, I thought that you didn't owe me anything, but I made a mistake. I realized, you know what? You still owe me a little money. So what's the halacha in the case where he first was moichel and said, you don't owe me anything. We're even. And then he goes back and he says, wait a minute. I just realized I forgot about this one thing that time when I did front you some money. Yesh omrim delo mehimninan le dahavle ki ilumacha lechaber beferish mashachayev lo ve'ena yachol lachzor bo. So some poskim say that you still don't owe him anything at that point, because since he expressly was moichel, you can't rescind the mechila. You can't rescind a gift. In other words, basically, when I said you don't owe me anything, I relinquished any debts, and I basically gave you a gift that you don't, I'm giving the debt to you. You don't have to service the debt anymore. It's done. What if I change my mind? Too bad. Too bad. You changed your mind later. I'm sorry, you can't. You already gave it to me. You relinquished the debt to me. But now, obviously, that's the halacha from a technical standpoint. But if he's your friend and he says to you, you know, I wasn't thinking, I remembered now. I remember that time that I fronted for you. It just left my mind. You may want to feel that at least Medine Shamayim, you should be chayiv, since the guy says, since you acknowledged that you owed him at one time, even though he was moichel technically, you should feel that sense of indebtedness. Upater perish afilu balatzes yidei shamayim pater, but once he's moichel vadai, you don't even have a heavenly, you shouldn't feel even a heavenly obligation. Okay, now let's take a look at the Likutim, because apparently Rav Stern lists an important case. Shapater b'dinei adam. Misha para lechavero sach ma'os. Person pays his friend a debt, gives him back, let's say, $1,000. Yachar hapiraon ba hamalva veher lo matbeya ushtar echad shehu mezuyaf. And then afterwards, the creditor comes back to you with some of the cash. He says, you know, the cash that you gave me, or the whatever, maybe it's a note that you gave me that's worth the money that you owe me, it's no good. It's counterfeit. There was a big issue in Israel a few years ago. There were some Palestinians who were, they flooded the market with millions of fake shekel coins. Did you hear about this? It happened a few years back. I think it was before COVID. I was in Israel, and I paid someone with shekels, and they kept looking at the shekels, because as they explained to me that there was this whole scandal, and the Israeli government said it's not worth it for us to go to try and figure out. I mean, they found the counterfeiters, they shut it down, but now to go after the ones that were already in circulation, they basically said we'll declare it legal tender, because it wasn't worth it for them to try and figure out using forensics what was good and what wasn't good.
To create a new coin, so that's
Yeah, right. So what happens is that the creditor comes to you after you've already paid him, and he says, look, I'm really sorry, but some of the money you gave me, this is not legal tender. And he says, this is what you gave me to pay back the debt. And the Lova says, well, I don't know that this money that you're showing me now is what I gave you. The halo ani kavar mesulak mimcha bishas piraon hachov va'achshaveni yodeya. Like when I gave you the money, I thought we were done. You know, you took the money from me. You said Shalom al Yisrael, we're done. And now I don't know if I still owe you money. And the Malva is claiming that this is the money that you gave me, and some of it is no good. He says, in this regard, there's a machlokus among the poskim. Hataz v'hashach ushar gedolei ha'achronim. The hataz svirulei dahabi ka'omer eini yodeya imena yechayev lecha. The kaimalan the yishba heses she'eno yodeya upater. The Taz says that as long as the debtor says, I don't know, we would impose this oath upon him that he really honestly doesn't know. I don't know what's going on with my computer. Something's going wrong. And as long as he says, I don't know, so then you're okay. This has taken a life of its own. This, what happened? Okay. The Kaimel on Dishpa has Sheni Adeo Potter. We call Malcolm, let's say, Sidei Shamayim Chayev Kimavur Kan Divrei Harav Darak B'dinei Adam Potter. So the Taz says you only have a heavenly obligation, you don't have a based-in obligation. We'll see the other opinion, Yirtzeh Hashem, tomorrow. I'm sorry that my mouse has gone crazy.